Ooh, let me go make some tweets real quick. Hey, everybody. We're just going to get started here in just a minute. I'm just going to make sure that all of our socials are posted. So if anybody else wants to join, they can hop in. But yeah, so today I'm Corey O'Daniel, chat a bit in the meantime. CEO, co-founder of MassDriver. And today I'm going to be showing you guys how I've been generating IaC recently with a couple of customers. So there's a ton of tools out there in the space for generating infrastructure as code for Terraform and OpenTofu. What we're going to do today is use just the base Terraform import functionality that's available nowadays with its experimental IaC generation. And we're going to be piping that through a number of AI prompts to make the modifications that I usually make by hand. So when you look at a lot of the tools in the space today, there's particularly in Azure, which is what I'm going to be generating IaC for today. There's like Azure to TF. There's Terraformer, Terracognita. There's a whole bunch of tools in this space, and all of them leave you with some work to do. And you know what we're doing today will also leave you with some work to do. There's absolutely no magic bullet or silver bullet, magic bullet for generating IaC. There's a lot of constraints that the tools just can't catch, but then there's also just your different policies for your business, like how you do your naming of variables, how you take inputs or reference remote state. So there's a lot of it that kind of has to be fine-tuned by you at the end. So we're going to use this AI approach, which I feel like has been a lot better than using something like Terraformer. So if you're not a big fan of AI or not a believer or don't want to spend money on all those credits, then I would say probably check out Terraformer. We actually have a webinar we did a few weeks ago using just Terraformer. I can share that as well if you want to see an alternative approach, but leaves you with a lot of the same work to do. So we're going to get started here in just about 2 minutes. I'm just going to do a few more retweets just to make sure that everybody's here. And also, just a note, I do have a few of my coworkers in the chat. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask at any point in time. Somebody will answer them, and if they don't, then I will as soon as I see them. Okie doke. Okay. Cool. And then I'm just going to do like a real brief slideshow, and then we'll hop into code. Just a couple of slides on just how I think about infrastructure as code and modeling Terraform and OpenTofu resources. So we'll go ahead and queue that up. There we go. So everything that we see here today will work with Terraform and OpenTofu. So, as I mentioned earlier, I'm Corey O'Daniel, CEO and co-founder of MassDriver, one of the companies behind OpenTofu. As of today, you have full compatibility between OpenTofu and Terraform. We are starting to build some really cool features in OpenTofu that I hope that Terraform will follow suit and implement as well. But any of the commands that you see today will work in both languages. So I'll be mostly working in OpenTofu because I want to spread the gospel. Cool. So yeah, let's go ahead and hop into it. So what we're going to talk about just briefly is like how we think about and design modules at MassDriver. We have a little bit of a different approach to how we kind of scope what goes inside of a Terraform module. And then I just want to do a hot take or two on registry modules. And I think this is really important for good module design is how you look at and use the registry module. So we'll touch on that in just a bit too. Cool. So let's go ahead and get started. For anybody who's new to infrastructure as code or Terraform, OpenTofu, just simple definition, like what is it, right? It's a means of managing and provisioning infrastructure in a declarative manner. What we're going to be focusing on is what we want, not how to get it. So we're not going to script a bunch of stuff. If this, then this, else that, and Bash or Python or anything like that. We're going to have this declarative language that manages our infrastructure. And the reality is, under the hood, it's it's a preprocessor for hitting somebody's API, right? It's a bunch of fancy JSON with logic. And if you're in this session, maybe you have some experience with Terraform or OpenTofu, or maybe you've just click opposite your way through the cloud and you're trying to figure out like how to catch up on this debt. If you're in that second case, again, like I said earlier, there's no silver bullet for generating IaC. Like this is a best effort and then some work to do. And it can definitely get you maybe 60, 70, 80% of the way there. But at the end of the day, I'd say if you're just getting into IaC, one of the things that's really key to do, and I think this is important, is like, again, this is fancy JSON, a little bit of logic hitting somebody's API. It's really important to separate Terraform or OpenTofu and HCL from the cloud service. And most of the time I see people that are newer to OpenTofu or Terraform get frustrated with it. It's a couple of things. It's like, the syntax is a little goofy, but you can learn you can learn the goofy syntax in a day or two, but people conflate the difficulties and nuances of each individual cloud service with Terraform is hard or OpenTofu is hard, right? It's not that. It's that RDS is a really complicated thing to configure. And if you haven't read the 30 pages of configuration for like how RDS works with keys and observability and monitoring and backups and everything else, it can feel daunting, right? So I would say if it's your first time like getting into a tool like Terraform or OpenTofu, try learning the syntax with some real simple resources, like just files, like just use the local file or some other simple resource like random IDs or something like that from one of those providers, just to get an understanding of the tool, and then start doing some IaC around services that you're familiar with. And that's going to just be a much better natural progression to learning how to essentially codify your cloud resources. So some of the things that we do when we design modules at MassDriver, whether it's for us or for our customers, is we do use case specific modules. And that's what I'm going to be doing here today. And what I mean by that is something you'll see frequently, public GitHub repos, the Terraform registry, is you'll see these modules that are just sweeping narrow abstractions over a cloud service. So you'll see an RDS module. It's like, okay, well, there's a lot of stuff in RDS that varies, whether it's Oracle, MySQL, Mariah, Postgres, or MS SQL Server, right? And so what we'll tend to do is make modules that are very much focused on a use case. If the database, it might be Postgres, RDS Aurora, flexible Postgres server in Azure. It's not flexible server. And what that allows you to do is allows you to start hard coding a lot of things, allows you to start skipping a lot of attributes that don't matter or resources that don't matter. And it makes your interfaces for your modules a lot simpler, right? If we're making a big sweeping module that works with every single database flavor underneath RDS, there's a lot of variables that you're going to expose on that module that do not apply to Postgres, right? And so now there's an overhead when you're trying to deploy Postgres of, okay, I got 115 variables. Like, what do I set for the MySQL bin log thing for Postgres? Oh, Postgres doesn't have MySQL bin logs. Like, so why is it an option? And so this is how we design. Another example is like, we don't make an S3 bucket module. We might make an ETL bucket module that has a lot of the attributes already tuned for like how to do different stages of ETL. Or we might have a logging bucket module that has, maybe longer life cycles for how long it stores those log objects and moves them off into cold storage. So we try to make them use case specific and build as much of our expertise into these modules as possible. And that's what I would recommend as well for anyone else who's getting into module design. And then I just want to take one note kind of on that about registry modules, and we won't be using them today. One of the things I see with these registry models, again, is they are too generalized. A lot of them are just re-implementations of the underlying resource APIs. This is just a screenshot from, I think, the AWS VPC module. And you can see that literally everything is just mapping variables back to the resource attributes. And like, why does this happen, right? Like, well, the reason it happens is you have 1,000 people from 1,000 different companies all sharing their opinion on like what their configuration should look like. And you get to this point where your abstraction has no value. And so what I like to see in modules is I like to see things where you come in and you see an attribute and it's just not there if it doesn't matter. It's not mapped to some variable that might be null, or maybe it's hard coded, right? So like maybe for Postgres, we always want to set something very specifically, like we always want to use a custom key, or we always want to hard code some specific parameters for the way that we run Postgres, right? And that just, again, that makes your surface area a lot easier to reason about when you're looking at the outside of these modules and the variables that need to go into them. And it also makes it less likely that you're going to have a breaking change. If literally every single attribute is exposed on the outside of these things, it's daunting, it's overwhelming. And that's kind of why we avoid these modules. So you'll see crazy things like modules with like 17 versions for setting up a Kubernetes cluster. It's like there's 17 ways, like we've had 17 breaking changes on how to set up a Kubernetes cluster, but they're still at like the 1 point something like major version of Kubernetes itself. Like that seems a little unreasonable to me. So just a couple of notes on that, and let's go ahead and hop into it. So again, comments, feel free to ask a question at any point in time. If don't have enough, if my Zoom level's not high enough, let me know. And let's go ahead and cut over to some code. Okie doke. Okay, so let's get started. So what we're going to do today is I've actually built these resources in MassDriver. And so if you're not familiar with MassDriver, just a quick blurb. We're a visual development environment for managing infrastructure as code. The idea is that you can design these Terraform modules as an operations engineer. You can publish them into our registry. And then when your developers need cloud resources, they literally diagram. And as they diagram, all the provisioning happens from the catalog of resources that you've built. So it really gives developers the ability to move quickly in the cloud without having to constantly like shoulder tap somebody to build something for them, or a developer having to go learn Terraform themselves, right? They've got features to build. They shouldn't have to, fool around in Terraform all day. So I've already built these using Terraform. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pretend like I didn't. And I want to show you kind of my process of like how I go through this. So one of the things that's really, really key for generating IaC is having a good tagging convention. It makes a world of difference, whether you're following this approach that I'm doing today, or whether you are, I just realized I'm not sharing my screen. There we go. Whether you're following my approach today, or if you're using something like Terraformer, this is always just much, much easier if you have a good tagging convention in place. So I realize that a lot of people that are doing IaC generation are probably in this boat because they did some ClickOps and they may not have a great tagging convention. So what I'd say is if you're about to go on this endeavor, before you hop into the console, the terminal, hop into your cloud console. And you don't have to necessarily come up with the best tagging convention in the world to get started with generating IaC, but just come up with something to get started, right? And so an example is like, in MassDriver, we have these really great tags that we apply to every single resource that's managed through the platform. And they kind of look like this. You get a project, which has a slug. You get a target or an environment, which has a slug. And so it makes it very easy for me to go in and find specific projects resources. I can search across my entire cloud account and find all my staging resources, or I can combine these two and find, my Gen IaC projects staging resources. But if you didn't have the time to do this, another really good approach is just going in and doing a tagging convention like this, right? IaC Gen work in progress. Like, these are like, that's the key that you're going to put on, and then the value would be your name. So I'd literally do something like this. I'd go through and say, okay, I'm making an EKS module, and I'd go through and I would tag all the things I know are related to EKS with IaC Gen work in progress Corey. And why? This makes it very easy for me to now grab IDs out of the cloud's APIs and feed them into Terraform. And why my name? Well, if I've got a team of ops people and we're all trying to do this, it's nice to not stomp on each other's toes. So this right here is just a really good strategy for kind of tagging all the resources that you want to be focusing on for the module that you're currently working on. And then what's really cool is when you're done with this, you can just set the tags in the Terraform module that you actually want, hit apply, and it will erase the temporary tags that you've kind of put on there. So cool. With that, let's get cracking. So What you'll see here is I've got just a pretty empty directory. And what I have inside of it is I have 2 modules. And I want to be clear about what I'm doing here, because if you've been in the Terraform space for a while, or if you've got some debt, you might see something here and kind of misinterpret this. So I'm not doing a Terraform pre 1.0 directory for production, directory for staging. That is an absolute anti-pattern. Terraform has workspaces now. You should not be using directories to manage environments. It makes you fall out of parity. What I'm doing here is I'm going to do this because I'm actually trying to take 2 different environments, get their IaC, and then get an idea of what's different about these environments. And so this is the way I go through it. I'll take my production, my staging, I'll generate IaC, and what you'll see is sometimes when people have been ClickOpsing, you might have services or resources in production that you don't have in staging. Happens all the time. People want to save money in staging, so they don't make maybe a Redis cluster for their application for caching, right? And what I try to do here is I try to use this to find my disparity between my environments, and then I'll end up backing out this prod and staging module into a single module with a prod and a staging workspace. So this just gives me the ability to essentially use diff to be able to see like what's actually different about my environments as I'm importing them. So cool, let's get going. So one of the first things I want to show is, again, we're going to do this based on Azure today. And I'm just going to go ahead and run this Azure resource command. And what you can see is if I run this, I've got a ton of resources in my Azure account. So again, what I'm doing here is I'll just show this really quick. Everybody can see the font size okay. Do I need to go up any larger? I'm seeing comments, so I'm going to assume that's cool. So what I'm doing here is I'm just listing resources from the Azure API, and I'm putting on 2 tags that I know that I happen to be using. So I'm trying to find some staging environment stuff. Now, one of the things that sucks a little bit about this CLI command is Azure's resource list with the tags isn't logical or, not a logical and. So I actually got everything in the Gen IaC project, and I got every single staging resource, whether it's in this project or not. And so, you can do some fancy stuff with JQ, and that's what I'm going to do here to kind of like narrow this down. And so this is actually, these are the resources in my Gen IaC staging environment. So I'm just doing a little JQ magic here. And what I actually have is I have a little command that I use all the time that just lets me do this for each one of the clouds. So I can just give it a list of tags, whether it's Azure, AWS, etc. I can show a little demo of this. And I'm going to share all this code afterwards. So it's a nice little script that just kind of lets you grab all your resources. You can see I got a ton of stuff in AWS, which we won't be focusing on today. So what I want to do is I want to get the IDs, and that's where this becomes very easy. Whether you're doing, or sorry, much easier, whether you're doing this following this approach using, OpenAI and ChatGPT, or whether you're using Terraformer, starting with identifiers, if you have them, is the easiest way to kind of go about this. You have the exact resources that you want to bring in. So what I did is I ran this script that I have that kind of ORs these tags together, and I dumped it to this resources.json file. And so if I open this up and take a look, what you'll see is, again, I was doing Gen IaC staging. You can see I got a couple of resources. I'm trying to import a Postgres database here. So I got a couple of resources that I know I'm not exactly looking for. So this is another database in the same project. I'm going to take this out. I'm going to take this out. And this is a network that happened to be in my staging environment. So I'm going to narrow it down to these 3 resources. So now I've got a starting point. I've got this resources JSON file that I'm looking at that has the 3 resources that I want to start generating Terraform for. And so normally what you do here is you have these IDs, and you run write an import block in Terraform. And so now you're off looking at the Azure docs. Okay, what is the resource type for a flexible server? What is the resource type for a DNS zone? What is the resource type for a virtual network link, right? And so this is where I start to lean into some of the model stuff. So let me just save this really quick with just those 3 resources. Don't see any questions. So let's go ahead and run my first prompt. So I'm using a couple of tools here. So I'm going to run this, and while it's running, it's not super interesting what it's going to print out. Let me show you my prompt really quick. And I'll share the prompts as well. So this first prompt, what it is doing is it's telling the model to take this list of IDs that I have, this resource JSON, and generate Terraform import blocks for them. So it's going to go through, and I'm telling it that I'm going to use the experimental generate config out. And so I want some full Terraform that I can copy and paste in here. And I tell it to do a couple of things. First, I tell it, yes, generate this block. But if you see any resources that happen to be of the same type, let's say you're building a module for VNets and you got 2 or 3 subnets, right? You're going to want those in for each blocks. And all of the tools that are out there today just generate resource after resource. So if you run Terraformer, you're going to have 5 resource blocks for your subnets, which breaks parity, right? If I'm deploying this to production and deploying it to staging, they both have to have 5 subnets. Well, what happens if staging needs 3, right? What I really need is a for each block. So I can say staging has these 3 subnets, production has these 5 subnets, and I still have 1 module. So this prompt is telling the model to take these IDs, and if there's any duplicates, essentially hyphenate the resource name that it's going to inject them into. So it'll be something like that. So let's go ahead and run this first prompt. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to concatenate this resources list on the end. So I've got that prompt, I've got this JSON object I'm going to append to the end. And then the tool that I'm using is this tool called Mods, which is pretty rad. I would definitely stick this in your tool chain. So what Mods is, it's the CLI by the Charm Bracelet team. They make a whole bunch of really cool CLI tools and Go libraries for building TUIs, rendering Markdown in the console. And what Mods is it's just a really simple text-based API to almost any AI model. So I can just type mods. Let me just show you really quick. Mods, what's up? And it's going to go hit one of them, and it's to say, hey, what's up? And it's hitting. You can see it's hitting OpenAI here. So it's just like going to OpenAI and pasting something into the chat here. So what I'm going to do though is I'm going to pipe all of my prompt and pipe these resources into Mods. Tell it that I want the format to come out as HCL. And as long as I have not blown through all of my credits, which happened late last night, I should be hitting a new model and getting actual good code. Every once in a while, Mods has this really cool functionality where if you've run out of credits or if the model is degraded, it will fall back to different models. And so when I was doing this earlier, it was falling back to like ChatGPT 3 and just generating garbage. So one thing that I've learned in doing this is take the fallbacks out. I'd rather have a script that crashes because the service isn't available rather than getting degraded to a less intelligent artificial intelligence. Cool. So you can see here, it generated a bunch of stuff. It generated the import commands. I also asked it to generate specifically the CLI commands to do the imports as well. I'll go into why I do that in just a second. One note when you're using Mods, you can actually set the line wrap length, and it's very important to set that. So it's wrapping weird here because it's in VS Code, but if I grab this and hop over to import, paste this in, you'll see that I got these nice, super long lines. The default for Mods is to line wrap at 80, which puts a hard line wrap in resource names, which is invalid Terraform syntax. So that's one thing that I did modify in my Mods config, is just setting my line wrap to, I think I said it's like 300 or 400 because the Azure IDs can get so long. So I've got this script here. Again, if I pop open this module and look, you'll see the only thing that's in here right now is a provider configuration and then this import statement. And so from Terraform 1.5 on, there is an experimental code generation. Now, this code generation works pretty good. And we'll see this here in just a second. Let me go ahead and change it to module staging. Let me just do a tofu. I might have to init. Now, again, Terraform and OpenTofu have the same CLI parameters, so this works with Terraform as well. Config out equals generated.tf. Okie doke. And we'll go through like what's cool about this and what leaves something to be desired. So boom, you can see it did some generation. You can see this file appeared over here, and it even ran a plan, and you can see that it wants to import 3 things. So let's take a look at the code that comes out of this. because I mean, it's pretty good. It's better than most of the tools that are out there, Terraformer, etc. It leaves a lot to be desired if you've got a lot of Terraform experience. So let me show you what we did get out of this. So first off, I'm lucky. You saw this plan ran and it did not error. So you will get errors from this occasionally, and it's based on the providers. So more complex providers, more complicated resources, can generate code weird. So one place I see this a lot is, let's say that there was like a number field on here that could be optional. You might see something like, oh, like maybe favorite number, and the favorite number will be 0, right? Well, maybe this API doesn't support 0 as a number. What it actually want to do is set it to null, right? So like they're doing some like PHP 4 nullability there. So you'll see things like this where it'll set the value to like 0 instead of null. So it's just some like really goofy stuff like that. And Terraform's pretty good at picking it up. So when you run the plan, it'll be like, hey, you set this to 0. It's not a valid value. And then you just kind of set it to null. So there's very weird places where you'll see it kind of generate some goofy stuff. In Azure, what I've seen is like when you're doing VNets, a lot of times if you're doing VNets and you're using subnet blocks inside the VNet resource, it'll generate the ID as a field, which is an output field, not an input field, right? And so Terraform will kind of tell you that stuff like, hey, this field can't be set, and you just kind of go in and remove it. Now, what's cool is I'm actually working on a prompt right now to change all that stuff, because when you do run into that, like Terraform does a good job of telling you what's wrong. What I've run into is I've seen that you can get some pretty good fixes from the newest Claude and the newest ChatGPT can kind of pick those up and correct the code. What I haven't gotten is a workflow that generates like a git diff that I can just apply to it to do the fixes. So like you'll run it, you'll get like some examples of how to fix it, then you have to kind of copy and paste it into place. So I'm working on that now where I can actually shoot the code off to it, ask it for a fix, get a git diff back, have it apply to the Terraform code, run plan again. If there's an error, just keep kind of kicking it back until like it hits some number of max retries. But you can get some pretty good recommendations out of it today. It just doesn't, the patching gets a little goofy because like you're not really sending in a file system, you're sending in a blob of text, right? So this is cool. Like I said, there are some things that kind of leaves to be desired. You might have some errors here. Some of the other things that kind of suck about this is use no variables, right? There's no referencing. So you can see here, I've got this private DNS zone. And I've got up here a private DNS zone virtual network link. Like I can obviously do some like resource referencing here. And then there's no for eaches. And so what I want to go ahead and do now is first, I'm going to go ahead and just kind of get this stuff into my state file. So if you remember, one of the really cool things with mods is you can do this little recall thing. Where you can recall your last statement. So you remember I did these tofu commands at the end to do import. Since this isn't really production code, and I don't really care, I'm just going to do a tofu apply. We saw that plan earlier. It said that it wanted to import these resources. It understands what it's doing. So I'm going to do a tofu apply. You can see it's going to import those. I'll spell yes incorrectly because I don't know how to use a keyboard. So we'll try that again. There we go. And you can see it imported those. Now if I do a tofu plan or a Terraform plan, there should be no changes. And then I can actually remove my import TF file now. Now, why did I print those tofu import commands? For a demo like this, Terraform apply is fine. But what I usually find is when I'm doing this and I'm kind of doing staging and production at the same time, and I'm getting an idea of what the differences are between these two environments, I'll want to import the resources a bit slower. I might want to be really confident, okay, this subnet's definitely a part of this module, I'll import it. I usually don't do a blatant like tofu apply or Terraform apply and import everything, just because I don't want to kind of take over the management and state of that until I'm sure that it should be in the module. So that's why that was printed there, because that's what I'm using pretty much when I'm working with people today, but just do a tofu apply for now. Cool. So now, the one thing that would have been really cool here is if we had a for each example. And so I didn't have a really good one in this module. So what I'm going to do is what all good founders do, and that is fake it till I make it. So I'm going to go ahead and just cat that generated Terraform that I have here. And then I've just got a really silly example of some code that I want to turn into a for each block. It's just going to create 2 files locally. And I'm going to go ahead and concatenate that here so you can see. Sorry, I had that modified. So you can see that just kind of threw on 2 files at the bottom. And I want to get these files in state. What I'm kind of trying to do here is replicate, like, if I had a database cluster with multiple instances, or if I had a VNet with multiple subnets. So I'm just trying to get something into my state file that has the same resource type that would be managed through a for each, right? And so almost all of these IaC generation tools are going to give you dumps like this. It looks like a near Tofu Terraform version, they will support for each, which will be super cool to see that happen. And even some versions of Terraform, it looks like it does, but then it just crashes if you try to do it. But they don't today. And so I have a prompt to kind of address this. But let's go ahead and do a tofu apply so I can create these 2 files so I can get it into my state. I need to just do an upgrade really quick to get the newest provider for local. Let's go ahead and do a tofu apply. And now this should create these 2 files on my disk, get it into my state. Bada bing, make those 2. And now if I cat my Terraform state, you see that I've got these 2 files in here, right? So again, like, I want these to be a for each. So I have a little prompt here for this as well. And this one, depending on if I get kicked down to ChatGPT 3 or if I stay on the newest version, it really depends on what the output looks like here. But while that's running, let's go ahead and take a look at this prompt. So what I'm effectively telling it to do is, if you remember in that first prompt, that generate prompt, I said, if you see any resources that are of the same type, name them main dash and then increment the number. So here what I'm doing is I'm telling it to find all the ones that had main 1, main 2, files, whatever, and back them out to locals. So I give it a couple of examples. If you see something like this, convert it to this, right? And this is nice. This is the resource block that I wish I had. This is what eventually is probably going to become variables to me, right? So in staging, I might want 3 subnets. So I'm passing in 3 subnets. In prod, I might want 5 subnets, and I'm passing in these 5 subnets that I want to create. So that's what I'm trying to do, is just get a temporary area that I'm working towards variables with. And then I also just give it some rules here, like if there's not an obvious or natural ID for the for each block, to just use the little auto incremented number that we created as that. So let's go ahead and take a gander at what this outputs. And then finally at the end, what it does is it also gives me the Terraform state commands to manipulate my state, right? So right now we have 2 different resources with 2 different state entries. And what we want to do is combine that into a single state entry for these 2 resource types. So let's take a look at the code and see let's just hope that I got ChatGPT 4 out of this and not 3. It looks like we did. It's a good day. It's a good day from the demo gods. Look at that. So it backed it out to this resource. And now, so if I do a tofu plan now, you're going to see that it wants to destroy those 2 files because my state's out of sync with my code. But this gave me exactly what I wanted. So let's do a tofu plan. And if you were coming to this demo thinking, man, I'm going to see him run a single command and 5 minutes later, I'm going to have absolutely scalable IaC, you're seeing probably one of the simpler ways of doing it, and it's tedious. So sorry about that. The world's hard. But as you can see here, it's trying to create these 2 files. We don't want to do that. We don't, like, if this was subnets or if these are database instances, this is a scary thing to see right now. So that prompt also dumped out a couple of state commands. I can run these. Now I would, again, if you're using these prompts, I would look at this before you just blindly run it. The prompt's gotten pretty good as long as I stay on the same model. But you can see that every once in a while, so you can't guarantee exactly the action place tofu apply. What did I run? There we go. Index value required. So it generated something a little goofy here. Okay, what did I get? Local file 1, local files hello. Tofu plan. Let me see real quick. Index value required. Source code not available. Brackets. Index brackets must can literal or see if this works. The demo gods got me. I must have got Chat GPT 3.7. What am I doing here? Let's try just one of these at a time. I swear I know how to use a computer. Let me try one thing really quick. Is that what it was? Yeah, I see it now. Okay. Let's try this. Terraform state move. It didn't quote those correctly. There we go. And then go ahead and run this. So I don't know if you saw what I did there, but I used that mods command to recall a previous build I did last night. So last night when I went through the demo, I was on ChatGPT, the newest GPT-4 the whole time. So I got really good output. And so I just saved my output there. So I was doing is hopping back to that. So again, I'm currently falling back to ChatGPT 3 if I'm out of tokens or if it's under stress. So kind of get some goofy things out of it every once in a while. But now I should be able to run tofu plan. And please don't destroy my database instances. The demo gods are back and shining. How great is this? Okay, very cool. So now we've got some code. We've got things creating resources with for each blocks. We've got all of our resources in here. We have a Terraform state file for our staging environment. Like this is feeling pretty good right now. So like what else can we do here? Like there's definitely some variable work to do and there's some references work to do. And I usually like to do these closer to the end. But one thing I do want to do now is just some basic variable work. And the reason I like to wait closer to the end to do the variable and referencing is like until I have staging and prod next to each other and I can see what the differences are and what the parity looks like, it really kind of helps me determine what to do. And what I mean by that is you might have things like, this is kind of a bad example, but like maybe you have a database and a KMS key in prod and they were in the same module, but in staging, you don't have a KMS key. You're just using the cloud's like default KMS keys or whatever. And that might become a variable that I want to input into prod, right? So managing your KMS keys and your databases in the same module is a dangerous blast radius. If somebody accidentally destroys your database, they destroy your database key with it, which means you can't access any of your backups, right? And so if I see that that's happening in prod, I might want to pull the key out into a separate module and make that key ID an input into my module, right? And so you don't really have a really good idea of like what should be a reference and what should be a variable until you have an understanding of how the parity of the module is going to work. And so I like to wait on some of that stuff. So like virtual network ID, it's definitely going to be a variable input because I like to keep my networks and databases separate, but I'll kind of wait until I get towards the end and I do all those together with when I'm doing staging and prod. But some stuff that I can see here is there's a lot of like really common variables that we use over and over and over. You kind of see them across like every Terraform module, right? There's the name of the thing, there's tags. As soon as you're doing anything with any sort of managed service, there's VM sizes, instance sizes, AMIs. And so I just have a small prompt here to kind of back out some common variables. So take a gander. And this one's just like really, really like on the nose. I'm pretty much saying like, hey, here's some friendly names of common variables. Like if you see anything that looks like one of these, turn it into a variable and create a reference to that variable. And then back that value out as the default. Again, I'm doing a staging and a prod module side by side. I'm just trying to back out all these things to variable defaults for now, get myself a nice diff later across these two modules. And that's when I'll start to work towards a single module with two different workspaces. So this one's pretty straightforward. There's a lot of like negative prompt instructions you kind of have to give these models when you're working in a workflow like this. If you haven't used the AI models before, a lot of times they'll give you abbreviations of what to do. It'll say something like, hey, here's the variable you wanted, and make sure you use it somewhere. And then it'll just do like the comment symbol ... And it's like, okay, I can't copy and paste that. And so I do a lot of like negative things here to really enforce that I want the entire code sent back to me. And so that's kind of why I'm being over the top here with a lot of this. And then what I'll notice is kind of what we saw earlier with that state move. It generated invalid syntax. So I'll probably go back and add a rule to that. It's the first time I've actually seen that happen. But each of these prompts, I also add rules, like whenever I see bugs kind of cropping up. So one thing that I saw a lot last week when I was working with somebody was the module thinking that variables could reference variables, which is invalid syntax in Terraform. So you got a lot of this where it's like, oh, there's a variable called environment, and tags also have that environment, so reference it. And so I'm saying, hey, don't ever do that. So there's a lot of like negative work you can do, but it's cool because like you see a lot of these patterns and output being consistent from like Terraform module to Terraform module, like the things that it kind of messes up. And you can give it just general directions, and it'll get pretty good at making sure that it's generating things that are kind of at least close to what you want. Again, like nothing in the IaC generation space is a silver bullet. If somebody's selling you a silver bullet, they're probably charging gold prices, and it's probably nickel. So let's go ahead and run this and see what it does. Okay, cool. So you can see it's backing out. So it detected all those tags that were common across all my resources. It backed out my Azure location. It backed out my Azure resource group name. I don't like that it's putting the cloud name on each of these variables. That's probably a rule I'll go back and put in, like don't prefix with a cloud name unless it's a multi-cloud bundle. But I think this is fine for now. And you can see it's dumping out the full file, which is cool. Okay, so let me just check. TD, I just saw your comment. Quote around. We got somebody who shell moves Terraform state here. An eagle eye. Okie doke. So let's go ahead and grab the old code here. You must have some like scar tissue built up. If you saw that, woo, you've moved some state. Okay, so now these variables are in. Again, I'm backing these out as defaults. These will not stay defaults in like my final module that I'm going to ship. I'm just trying to get something backed out. So when I do this again for production, I have something I can kind of diff. So I should be able to do tofu plan, and I should see that there's no changes. And so when I'm going through these, generating these and using these prompts, I essentially do a tofu plan after every single prompt just to make sure I'm getting what I'm expecting. You see no changes. So it did back out and do all the references the way that I would hope that it does. So that's cool. So we're in a pretty good spot. This is about the size of the module I'd aim for. As far as resources, 3, 5, 10, like I'm trying to focus again on this scope. There are a few other things I would like to see in here that we didn't catch. So for one, the way that the subnets are in Azure, I like to put database subnets with the database. Now, I know that might be a shock to anybody who's actually managed like network routers, but guess what? We're on network routers, we're in the cloud. And like putting that subnet closer to the database in its definition, I think makes your Terraform management a little easier, right? If I need a subnet for my Postgres instances and I have to go to my VNet module, punch in Postgres, make it, like that seemed a little tedious to me. I like having them close together. I also like to kind of in Azure, abuse resource groups and make a resource group for every single invocation of a module. You get infinity of them. Like, why have one? Why have a prod resource group? Why not have one for every single set of resources? It makes it a lot easier to kind of clean things up. So I'd love to see those two in this module. That's something else I'd be aiming for here. Why aren't they in here? Well, the cloud APIs, I can't remember if GCP does this off the top of my head, but I know Azure does. When you use the Azure resources, it doesn't actually return all resources in Azure. It's just a subset of resources. So there are some resources that you have to get from other APIs and CLI commands in Azure. So for example, like subnets are on, what is it? It's it's like AZ network VNet subnet list to get all of your list of subnets, right? There's another one for listing resource groups, et cetera, et cetera. And so when I ran that bash script at the beginning, it was just hitting the AZ resource API. So it only got actual resources. So, and the reason I don't hit all of them when I'm doing this is like they all have very different syntaxes and different inputs that you need. So it's hard to actually hit Azure and get all of the resources by tag unless you literally hit every single one of those APIs. But then like they're not all tag based, right? So when you hit the network one, you have to have the VNet name and you have to have, the VNet name and I think the resource group name. So it's not tag based, right? And so I'm trying to do this all tag based. So I'd normally bring in at least the resource groups here as well before I'd start working towards production. So what I want to do is just show something real quick. Pause, see if there's any questions. So we've got a pretty good module going right here. Again, like we're at like 60%. My next goal is to kind of do this for prod. We're obviously not going to have enough time to go through importing prod and doing the diff. But we are going to do another webinar on kind of backing out two different environments to a single module and a set of workspaces. So I'll make sure anybody who's interested in that, we can send out an email for that webinar as well. And it'll be kind of like the part 2 of this. But what I do want to show is going and starting this for the production side so you can get an idea of my flow. It's very much the same thing we just did, but for a different Azure subscription or an AWS account that has our production data. So let me just stop my screen share real quick and switch to something else. Let's go ahead and just share this really quick. So yeah, so this is just MassDriver really quick. What I want to just show is I've got this Azure Virtual Network module, and I've got this database module. This is the actual module that we're trying to back out right now. So this is a real Terraform module. These two things are connected. And you can see here, like this is my staging environment. And one of the things that MassDriver does is it kind of enforces architectural parity, but your scale and your like security credentials can vary per account. So this is what we just generated the IaC for, is essentially this module here. And I have a clone of this staging environment called prod, where I have the exact same infrastructure set up. It's a little bit different. I can come in here and I can, see all my different resource IDs. So I can come in here and grab things by ID. But I know what the tags are for this because we're using MassDriver to manage it. So it already has all my tagging conventions applied to every single resource that's deployed. I just wanted to kind of show you guys like how I'm jumping from like I have the staging environment to also I have a bag of production resources that I want to start importing as well. So this is what I'm going to start to import now. And again, I'm going to do this in another directory called prod. And then when I'm done with that, I'll diff, I'll essentially sort my HCL, diff it, and then start to back that out to a generalized module for the two of these. So stop the screen share, switch back to my code. That's the one. Okie doke. So I'm going to go ahead and go up a directory or two. I'm going to remove this resources. And then if I go back to my original command that I ran here, I'm going to just go ahead and throw prod on the end of this. There you go. And you can see all my prod resources. Again, this is just a small shell script that I have that hits the different tag-based APIs of the clouds, combines all the tags together and ORs them and gives me results back. So this is just something I use to kind of quickly find all my resources. So I'm going to pipe this to resources.json. That's where it all starts for me. Close out all of these files and take a gander at this resource.json. So you see I grabbed a couple of network resources that I don't necessarily want to use here. And, if we kind of go through this, like, make believe of, I went through and I tagged all this with my temporary tags just to kind of grab all the things that I want to import. While we're kind of crawling around in the Azure console, like trying to figure out what people have kind of click ops through time, one of the first things you might notice is, remember when we did this for my staging environment, I only had 3 things that matched this naming convention for generating IaC, staging, database. But in my production environment, I've actually got 6, right? So you can already see like there's some disparity. Even in an environment that's being managed by Terraform, like I do have some disparity. And the way that we model it in MassDriver is it's variables going into the thing, right? And so you can see here that there's 3 alerts. In my staging environment, I had alerting disabled, so there was 0 alerts. That's really the big difference here. There's 1, 2, 3 resources that were in my staging environment, and then in prod I have these metrics and alerts. So this is what this is like this is the disparity I'm looking for. And this right here, when I'm seeing this is the kind of thing that I'm going to try to back out to variables between these 2 modules when I make my common module. Is effectively like an alerts will be an input, and prod will have 3 of them going through this for each block, and staging will have none, but everything else will be in parity. So let's go ahead and I'll kind of just, again, we're going to go through the exact same process here. It's not super exciting. We'll just go through a few steps here and then wrap it up. But let's go ahead. We've got that outputted to resources. We got my resources edited down, and then we just kind of go through the same prompting. So I'm going to grab this prompt again. And again, I'll share these prompts and I'll share these bash scripts that I use to kind of go through my workflow. We'll send that out after the webinar. I'll put it on socials as well. So you can see here, you can see it's already detected this first one. So you can see like it's the metric alert, it detected that there's multiple of them. So this is great, right? So like this is the thing that we don't get from Terraformer. We don't get from Azure to TF. We don't get from Terra Cognita. So it's actually detected that. It's built the import scripts to import these hopefully correctly. It's got my network here. It's generating these commands. Now I'm going to wait until it's done generating the commands. The way that that mods kind of I guess uses end curses or whatever to like scroll the screen. If you copy while it's running, like it actually copies very weird stuff. It's very strange. So I always just wait until the end. So it's a little gift to me when it's finally done. Somebody call Sama and see if they can make this thing run a little faster. I know to use tofu. Come on. Okay, so grab these import commands. Over here, I've got this prod that I've already set up. Cool, and now I should be able to just do a regular old change directory module prod, tofu init. I don't know if I have this upgraded. I think I've already got all the, yep, I already had all the providers installed. So tofu plan, generate config out. Ooh, boom. Expected a metric alert ID. Okay, so we got pretty close. Let's see what happened here. So it got the virtual network link. It got the flexible server, got the DNS zone, and it just dropped all of the alerts. Well, that's fine because we're going to turn them into a variable anyway. So it looks like parsing segment, static metric alert, parsing metric alert ID. The segment at position 6 didn't match. Of course, the segment at position 6 didn't match. It never does, right? Am I right? The parsed ID, resource ID was missing a value for the segment at position 6, which should be the literal value metric alerts. Ah, okay, I see what it was. So when it generated my import command, it actually it did not. It looks like it did not it didn't make the right casing for the URL. So I think that's what it's choking on there. Let me take a gander really quick. You know, I don't memorize all the URL patterns of Azure. I don't know if you do. Maybe you saw that and you're like, Corey, come on. The thing it's supposed to be a capital A. Just bonk this really quick. Let's rerun that and see if that was it. I think it was just that the A was lowercase. Boom, there we go. So now it generated that, right? So a little goofy thing, right? Like, and that's what I was saying earlier. Like the Terraform actually, sorry, it's the Terraform. Yeah, Terraform gets some credit, but it's really the providers, generally give some pretty good error messages back, right? So that error message told us exactly what was wrong. And I bet that if I ran that, you can actually see I've already got a fix prompt that I've been working on. this is pretty good. It actually gives me the correct Terraform, but I've been trying to get this into a way where it'll be a git diff so I can apply it instead of, in that case, there's 3 different places. It's annoying. It'll to go and copy and paste 3 different times. So I'm trying to get it to do a git diff so I can just apply it. But it's very good at fixing the errors. It's just not good at generating the diff because you don't have a file. So it kind of gets confused about like what line 1 is and how many spaces and tabs and all that jazz. It just gets a little confused. But this is cool. We've got this 6 that it wants to import. I'm going to go ahead and again, like I wouldn't do an apply here to automatically do the import if I was really working with production data. I'd run each one of those commands as I was confident that something should be in this state file. And the reason why is like once it's in Terraform, right? That state file is local. If I accidentally Terraform destroy, oops, I've nuked prod. Like that's not great. So like that's why I usually do them one at a time instead of just like popping them all in. But now I should be able to do a tofu plan. Great. And now what I'll do is I'll walk this through that same process of going through each of these prompts to refactor this code, generate the variables, convert these metric alerts into for eaches. And then once I'm done, I'll have 2 generated.tf files that should look fairly similar. And that's where first thing I'll do is I'll diff the 2 files to get an idea of like how different they are. And then I'll usually just pop them up side by side. I'll split my console into 3, staging on the left, prod on the right, and then my new Terraform module in the middle that I start backing things out to. So I know we're getting close to the end of the webinar. I hope you all enjoyed this. There's a lot of tools here. There's mods. I'll drop a link in the channel for mods. Not those mods. Come on, those are beautiful looking medallions. But this is the one we want right here. A lot of really nice bracelets in there. Like I said, we're going to do another webinar on actually backing out these modules. That's like a whole other like hour of, kind of walking through some prompts to do the generation of resource referencing, backing out some additional variables. There's some prompts on generating the Terraform state for the 2 different workspaces. So we'll be doing essentially a follow-up to this webinar that we'll share with everybody that's registered, and we'll post it on all the socials as well. But I hope this is entertaining, or not entertaining. I hope this is informative and entertaining. That'd be great too. And just one other note: if you're a team that is kind of drowning in debt, if you're an ops team, or if you're a team of engineers and you don't have DevOps folk, we did announce 2 new services this week that MassDriver is offering. So we have the cloud platform, which is a really great way for managing Terraform at scale and giving your developers the ability to deploy things without necessarily being cloud experts. But we also launched 2 services. One's called DevOps Advisor. It's kind of an a la carte service that we offer, so you don't have to be a MassDriver user, but it effectively gives you access to a team of cloud architects that will actually work with you weekly to kind of enhance your organization's DevOps posture. And then we even do things like pull request reviews, architecture reviews. We're essentially like eyes and ears for your team to just kind of do or to mature more through the DevOps maturity model. And then we also have another product that's called DevOps Advisor. And that one's it's again, like it's not, you don't have to be a MassDriver customer to access that. And then the second one is MassDriver Platform Accelerator. And that one gets you access to MassDriver for your entire team. And then we'll actually come in and do hands-on work with your team. So if you've got 3 or 4 ops people, they're drowning in debt, you've got this new service you're trying to launch, they don't have time to Terraform it, the developers are clicking around in the cloud console, and like you wish you could get some rigidity and some process in place and actually get some IaC built for that stuff, you can bring MassDriver in and we'll actually do the hands-on work for your CI/CD pipelines, writing your IaC, and then get you access to the platform so we can get your operations team above water. So thanks everybody for coming today. I hope it was informative. Hope it was entertaining. If you've got great prompts and you've been kind of fiddling around with this too, would love to see them. And if you are kind of just starting to explore, I would say look at the new Claude models. Those have actually been probably the best ones I've seen so far. When I was working on this, I was just trying out the new ChatGPT stuff. So I wanted to use that, which has been pretty good. So yeah, thanks so much and have a great day. Can you share the prompts too? Yeah, I'm going to share all of the, sorry, I just saw that. I'm going to share all of the prompts and my bash scripts in just a bit. I'll push them up to GitHub, and then I'll post them on the MassDriver Twitter and the MassDriver LinkedIn. Thank you for that, and thank you for catching the quote thing earlier. You're an eagle eye. I love it.